Mental illness has always been one of the most disturbing and impactful themes used in horror media, and a lot of people never truly realize how terrifying having your own mind working against you can be. In the RPG Maker game Omori, being capable of putting you into these shoes is one of the most emotionally devastating games to date. But if you were shown Omori out of context, there is a good chance you wouldn't have a clue how dark this game truly was. Omori aims to break you by making you forget you're playing a psychological horror game, only for its extremely dark storyline and undertones. But if you're familiar with the game whatsoever, you probably knew this was coming. But due to the nature of the game, the truth of Omori tends to come as a shock to most people the first time that they play it. And on top of this, the level of disturbing elements tend to rely completely on secret choices, random chances, and just overall how you play the game. So after my first baseline analysis following my initial playthrough a few months ago, I decided to plunge myself back into this truly unique game, and ask myself, how dark was Omori really? But before all that, let's just briefly go over the not so dark parts of Omori, taking a brief moment to relax before we get into the bulk of the game. A sort of calm before the storm. Omori has a lot of clever ways of representing certain aspects of mental illness, even with subtle details in the game. And like a lot of cases, the gameplay is primarily masked behind a happy facade. This world is known as Headspace, a colorful, surreal land full of memories that we would have preferred to have lasted forever. And in here, they kinda do. You play as a colorless, emotionless boy referred to as Omori, surrounded by all of his best friends. But for the sake of this video, we will be focusing on purely Aubrey, Basil, and Omori, as they have the overall darkest character developments. Headspace is a large, spread-out manifestation of Sunny, or Omori's real-life counterpart's, psyche, and similar to in real dreams, consists of memories present in Sunny's real life, whether it be a whale from a picture book, a popular comic book character, or a real-life celebrity. They all have the shared purpose of distracting Sunny and the player from what is truly going on. I'm sure we all have a time during our lives that we consider to be the golden years, one that we wish could have never ended. But regardless, time rushed on, and now a lot of us may only be able to look back on that time. Omori and Headspace takes this to the extreme, but eventually this illusion is bound to fall down. In Omori, this is exactly what we see happen. Little hints can be noticed throughout the game, on what the truth really is. Sunny's mind is not happy, and in fact, the opposite, and you can start to see glimpses of what his subconscious really is, tormented and broken. Just in case it didn't clue you in before, there are a lot of warnings I'm putting on the screen right now for people that might be sensitive to these topics, as well as a spoiler warning. Now, to get into what everyone came here for. Picture this. The wind is blowing. You're laying in a calm field on a beautiful day with all of your closest friends, and laying peacefully on your older sister who you idolize. Everyone is calm and you are happy. But this isn't your reality. Not anymore. The truth is, it hasn't been for a long time. Things are different now. Much different. Everything changed that night. The night you couldn't handle all the pressure. You had just been trying to spend time with her, but her drive for perfection, the same notes over and over, would come to drive Sunny to a breaking point. It was all because of that stupid violin. You didn't even mean to do it. It was an accident. She got in your way. You couldn't... This couldn't be happening. Sunny is seen to have a quiet and insecure personality beforehand, being relatively emotionless. Despite this, he is quick to anger, which is what would really turn his world upside down. Now, I decided to mention this event first, despite it being the big reveal at the end of the game. It is overall what turned Sunny's life from the fond past he remembered into the dark abyss that he currently resides in. This event would come to be the first on our elevator into madness. Soon after, not only would his friends separate, his parents would go as well, and his dad would assumably not want to see him anymore, which is something that'll go more into depth into later. Omori leaves it up to the player to interpret whether Sunny is inherently bad. For now, I'll go over what he has going for him. It did seem like what he did to Mari was a total accident, a sort of heat-of-the-moment ordeal. Mari is shown to block him when she is pushed, and afterwards, Sunny is of course heavily traumatized with guilt, even to a level of it manifesting into a horrific entity. Mari's death had a large effect on everyone, but it seems to understandably hit him the hardest, especially at such a young age, as Sunny is assumed to be around 13 when Mari is killed. Regardless of his intention, the effect it had on his mental state is undeniable. Now, since I'm nowhere near a qualified psychologist, I don't really feel qualified to diagnose Sunny disorders officially, but it seems to be clear to a lot of people on the internet that Sunny shows signs of dissociative amnesia as well as PTSD, and falling into an isolation mentality known by the Japanese word hikikomori. Now, many of us are probably familiar with PTSD, and symptoms include flashbacks, isolation, and in some cases, severe depression, all of which are exhibited by Sunny at some point during the game. The latter term I mentioned is a Japanese word for shut-in. When Mari passed, Sunny would isolate himself inside for many years, desperate to find a way to forget, and this would come in the form of headspace, but at the cost of isolation from friends and family, and even losing a sense of self. His only solution being to sleep away in white space, where he would come to discover Omori, his alter ego, who could stop his pain, and give him images of what he once was. But Sunny could not hide here forever. Eventually, his mom would make the decision that they were going to move away, forcing Sunny to make a choice, to confront his past or to suffer forever. But his choice would not only affect him, but spiral many of his closest friends into their own personal hells. Aubrey was a girl who was portrayed as a very happy and energetic one. She seemed to care a lot for the members of the friend group, which is why it hurt her so badly when Mari passed. Despite her calm nature, her home life is tragic, as it is undeniable she suffers from neglect, after her father left for an unknown reason, leaving her mother in a state of shock, seen watching the TV with a blank expression, the entire house in ruins, with Aubrey assumably being forced to take care of herself. When Mari died, everyone had their method of coping with it. Hiro and Kel both became immersed in their work, Kel focusing on sports and Hiro academics, eventually leaving for college. Sunny, as we know, isolated himself to his house, cutting off contact with everyone, with Basil taking a very similar route, for reasons that I'll go over next. This left Aubrey alone, and having to deal with losing someone she cared about immensely, and unlike Sunny, she had no idea why. A factor of Mari's death I've refrained from mentioning until now is the fact that to everyone except for Basil and Sunny, Mari was implied to have died by suicide, to the shock of everyone around her, leaving Aubrey to blame herself, stuck at a home she dreaded so much, until eventually she would snap, and all the pain would turn to anger and resentment, and she would dye her hair, start carrying around a baseball bat, and hanging around a new, like-minded group. It is obvious the Aubrey from before was gone. This completely and utterly broke her, and to make matters worse, when she gave Basil another chance, she would notice her precious memories drawn over, and with it, any sense of sympathy for Basil. But how could this happen? Why would Basil do something like this? In fact, he had been acting overall odd this entire time as well. Basil, in my opinion, would come to be the most broken person of them all. Now, I think in order to discuss Basil's turmoil, we need to rewind a bit to the night Mari was killed. If you're familiar with the game, you know Sunny did not act alone. Throughout many of the pictures, Sunny and Basil seem to be extremely close, and this is emphasized on that night, as Basil bared witness to Sunny killing Mari. He was the only person to know what truly happened, but out of loyalty for Sunny, he would help him frame her death as a suicide to everyone else, bearing the same guilt as Sunny because Sunny couldn't do something that horrible. He couldn't have. It must have been something behind him that made him do it. Something. Similar to everyone else, Basil's life would completely fall apart. He would isolate himself similar to Sunny, but not for the same reason, but because he wanted more than anything to keep their secret. In Basil's eyes, him and Sunny were in this together. He trusted that if he inserted himself into harm's way to help Sunny, that he would be there for him in return. But this was not the case. Selfishly, Sunny would cut himself off from Basil just like everybody else, leaving Basil to suffer alone. No one to talk about with what he did, with what happened. And on top of this, Sunny would be the one to scratch over the pictures of Mara in the photo album, allowing Basil to also take the blame from this, leading to excessive bullying from Aubrey. If you choose to go outside before you move, you will find Basil frequently breaking down in the bathroom, being consumed by his something that has become much bigger than Sunny's, leading me to believe that he is in more pain and burden more guilt for his actions. Sunny abandoned him, and he didn't even resent him for it. Basil remained a kind heart all the way up to the very end. Similar to Aubrey, Basil has no actual parents, instead living with his grandma and a caregiver, and when she dies, it leaves Basil with no one. He attempts to recreate old memories by going to old locations that he loved, but is relentlessly bullied and even eventually thrown into a lake. When he recovers, he is isolated in his room, and if you don't finally choose to stop abandoning him, you find him the next morning, impaled by his own shears. Basil, in my opinion, has one of the darkest plot developments in Omori, and I couldn't help but worry about him and feel extremely bad my entire playthrough, as he was obviously struggling, but out of loyalty for Sunny, he was the only one who could truly talk to. Basil never really asked to be involved in something like this. Rather, he was just an extremely loyal friend that wanted to protect the people he cared about. And in the end, in many of the options, he pays for it with his own life. After going over what has been going on in Faraway Town, we return to what has been occurring inside of Sunny's house. During the gameplay of Omori, darkness is surrounding Sunny's mind, both figuratively and very literally. Blackspace is the reality of what Omori's mind has warped into, the guilt of Mari's death completely consuming it. If Headspace is a dream, Blackspace is its nightmare, one that mostly consists of various different disturbing imagery of Mari and the entity Something. But sifting through it can better help us understand how dark Omori really gets. But before we get into Blackspace, I want to go over what Something really is, the entity that has been haunting Omori and Basil in both real life and Headspace. No matter where Sunny goes, Something always follows. As mentioned earlier, Sunny shows many symptoms of PTSD, and flashbacks is a huge part of this condition. I think Something is a great way to represent guilt, and flashing back to what he has done. And it really shows how trauma can come back to haunt you out of nowhere at random points. And Something emphasizes this, as it seems like it leers around every corner, in mirrors, in caves, and behind vines in Headspace. Something, for those who are unfamiliar, originated from seeing Mari's lifeless eyes peering through her hair when Basil and Sunny framed her suicide, with Basil's being theorized seeing her at the bottom of the stairs, which is why his is slightly different. It was an image that neither him nor Basil could ever unsee. Something can also manifest in the form of Sunny's fears, being spiders, drowning, and heights. Just another aspect of Sunny's mind that is obviously spiraled, leaking into Sunny's real life in the form of horrific hallucinations. If Something and Mari weren't enough to convince you that there is something seriously messed up with Sunny's head, Blackspace is absolutely horrific, containing everything from distorted images of Mari, corpses of the Headspace characters, and a room where you literally just cut your pet cat in half. But one of the most disturbing hints that we see here comes in the voice line of a character labeled Dad in the game files. Now this line is the beginning of a whole nother theory, that Sunny's parents, unlike anyone else, didn't buy Sunny's excuse that Mari had killed herself, which would explain why his dad abandoned him and his mom will make long trips leaving her severely mentally ill son home alone for days on end. But if this is true, they must have purposely kept it a secret in order to keep their son out of jail. So I guess they aren't too despicable for this. Throughout Headspace is where Blackspace to me is the most creepy. Headspace is meant to suppress Blackspace, to hide the truth from Sunny, but as often the truth does seep through. For those who don't know, the main plot in Headspace is to find Basil after he goes missing, but it seems like after a while you realize that it was never about Basil, but instead Sunny's subconscious trying to force him to see the truth. To search for Basil will inevitably lead you to Blackspace, as that is where he resides now. I have a theory that one enters Blackspace when they are snapped out of the illusion, as that's how Basil is sent there, when he sees a picture of Mari hanging from the tree. It is unknown if Sunny feels guilt for abandoning Basil, but he seems to be aware that he is suffering, as Basil in his mind dies over and over again in Blackspace. And I come back to the question of this video. How dark is Sunny and, in turn, Omori really? Now, the answer to this question is complicated for a lot of reasons, but for my reasoning to make sense, I have to go over what Omori really is. Omori is shown to be a personification of Sunny's dissociative amnesia. Now, if you're unfamiliar, it is basically when a traumatic event can cause so much psychological stress on an individual that it actually removes it from their memory. And this is exactly what Omori does for Sunny. Every time Sunny is close to viewing something that could remind him of that night, Omori will return him to the void of white space, where he can suppress his memories and exist in nothingness. Omori seems to have a sort of control over Sunny's version of Headspace, making sure Blackspace is covered up entirely, but there are often characters in Headspace that will purposely try to expose the truth to him, such as the Branch Coral in the Abyss, Daddy Longlegs in the Forest, and Abby, who, to summarize, is basically one of the three most important figures to Omori in Headspace. Now, there are a lot of theories around Abby and how she was banished. The leading one is that in some way or another she went against the will of the Dreamer, and in return was banished to Blackspace. Now this to me seems like she may have told him the truth or exposed him that he can't live like this forever, possibly making it worse for him, but it was the truth. And it might have not been what he wanted, but it was what he needed. But regardless, Sunny still will choose to surrender himself to Omori in a majority of the game because he doesn't really know what else to do. This is where Omori's choice system comes into play. Sunny is moving away, and this is his last chance to fix his mistake, to own up to what he did, and to repair his friendships, or in the case of the Omori or Hikikomori route, refuse to make the change and slowly lose himself more and more to Omori, eventually completely becoming him. Sunny himself seems to be stuck in a sort of childlike state, as frequent to a lot of people who have trauma when they are young. Sunny in many ways still pretends that he is 13, and that is evident by the world he is inside of. Omori seems to have the goal of assuring Sunny doesn't feel pain anymore, by any means necessary, even if it means Sunny never wakes up again. You, the player, have to make the choice to fight back, and learn to overcome, or in turn, succumb to Omori in one of the game's many bad endings. Sunny, in some cases, seems to believe he is Omori, like when he attacked Aubrey with a knife in the park, not realizing the difference between fabrication and reality. But this doesn't explain how he murdered his sister. On that day, it seemed like he made an unfortunate accident, but instead of solving it, he just made it worse. And part of that is to blame on the emotional stress he had on him. But in abandoning Basil and lying to his friends, he broke every single person around him, making Aubrey feel isolated, separating his parents, and even after Basil put his life in risk, Sunny left him to rot and to live with the knowledge that he was accomplished to Mari's passing, all the way up to being driven to taking his own life. A truly cruel fate. With all of this in mind, I'll leave it up for you to decide how dark Omori was really.
Well, that was quite an adventure. I'm sad to see you go, but don't worry, this doesn't have to be the last time we see each other. I got another cool video. Just for you. Hurry, the video's almost over.